I think because of Afghan makes you question life a bit more deeply, and I was still questioning those things, like what was that all about? I was driving to work one day and BBC World News was playing. It was bombing in Yemen, bombing in Saudi, bombing in Afghan, bombing in Iraq. It was like the whole Middle East was on fire. That's what it seemed like. And I remember praying out loud. I'd met a girl, really cool girl, and she went to church. We went for a date on a Thursday, and I was like, what are you doing this weekend? And she said, I'm going to church tomorrow. And I was like, what do you mean you go to church? You're way too cool to go to church. I go to this big American church. It's like thousands of people go. It's like on fire, you know, the music's amazing. Everyone's really like full of the spirit, and that. I was like, okay, great. And she invited me along, so I went to this thing and I was hit with this wall of emotion while I was there. I didn't really know what to do with it. I was just hit by this, what I would describe now as just a spirit enveloping me. The next day I'm driving to work with this BBC World News thing going on, all this bombing, and I just prayed and I said, if there's more to life than this, then I want to know. And I turned the corner and I just had a massive encounter with God. You know, he just opened up the universe to me and said, yeah, you're not on your own. It's like, you asked the question. You know, my heart and my mind was open. So when you ask a question with an open heart, you get the answer. And that's where I found faith in the Middle East, you know, and that changed the trajectory of my life entirely.
How long ago was that now?
9 years ago.
Really?
Yeah, 9 years.
Hello, I'm Kieran O'Connor and welcome back to episode 6 of the Calculated Risks podcast. Today I'm joined by Chris Flynn. Chris is the founder of Team Health Performance and also the founder of Green Mile Training Camp. Chris served in the forces throughout his 20s and then travelled the world in his 30s. He stayed loyal to his passion for health and well-being and is now helping the corporate well-being industry and the people within it to solve low productivity and low energy due to poor health. Hello, Chris.
Hi, Kieran.
Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, mate.
No worries. I start the podcast the same way every time. Here's a copy of my book. Hopefully I can collect some dust somewhere, I'm sure, in the cabinet.
No, I'll make use of that. Thank you, mate.
No worries. The podcast is called Calculated Risks, as you know. So every podcast starts the same, and we've had varied answers. So I'm really curious about yours. Worth mentioning, I've been looking forward to this episode. I love it last week. Health and well-being is very important to me. So I'm excited to learn from an expert, a local expert. Thinking back to the risks you've taken in your career, what was the first big risk you can remember? And can you remember how you were feeling around that time and when you took that risk?
Yeah, I think that's an easy one for me. It was simply leaving home and joining up. You know, I had this call to adventure as a young man. Everybody in Wales was just doing the same old thing, going through the motions of life, and I just had a burning desire for adventure. So the quickest way I could find that, you know, as a 17-year-old, having tried college for a few months, was to join the armed forces. So I remember signing up after a fight with my brother, and telling him that I was going to come back and sort him out after I'd squared myself away in the forces. So that was the biggest risk, I suppose, was changing everything, you know.
The biggest point that stood out to me there was filling in your brother. Did you ever get him back from that one?
I came back months and months later. I've got 5 brothers, two of which you know.
Yeah.
And we've become best mates ever since.
Good.
You know.
Brotherly love.
Yeah, 100%. It was a good motivator at the time, but I came back with a calmer, clearer head, and me and my 5 brothers are good mates now, still to this day.
Good. And how long did you serve for?
12 and a half years. Yeah, so to the age of 30, which is it's a make and break time. You either stay for the full duration, and you stay for 22 years, or they call your 12 and a half year your halfway point. You know, you get half pension, you get a payout, and some other perks. But I thought I was a career man from the beginning. I thought, this is me for life. You know, I just loved it so much. But having done multiple tours in Afghan and questioning the kind of the morality of things and why we're here as humans, you know, I had no choice but to leave. You know, at 30, and at 30, you're young enough to start again. You know, so I'd had a career and I thought I'd start another career now. So I went into occupational health after that.
And you've gone on a great journey since leaving, which we'll come into.
Yeah.
The second part of that question is the risks that you've taken more recently. So fast forward 20 odd years, the most recent risk you've taken, like how does your relationship to risk taking feel now compared to that big one back then?
Risk is something I've always thought about. So when, you know, we were chatting about the podcast, it was something that really spoke to me, because on leadership courses whilst serving in the armed forces, one of the attributes of a strong, good leader was the ability to take risks, calculated risk. And much of what you're doing in the armed forces around risk, physical risk, is often, is clearly there. So risk is always at the forefront. And, I then went into risk management, occupational health and safety risk management afterwards. So I've always thought about risk. I think we're designed for risk. I think if you're not taking risks, then you're not living. It is so important. It's so important for, I think, everybody. Certainly young men need to take physical risks. I believe that to be true. That's what sports is all about. That's what the armed forces, duty and service was all about. We need to take risks for biological reasons, for mental reasons, for psychological and spiritual reasons. You have to take risks. So I took a lot of physical risk growing up, parachuting, diving, fighting, boxing and fighting abroad. But I was still a very secure person with regards to career. Like I'd always been conditioned to, got to get a mortgage, got to get a pension, got to have your future sorted out. And was always thinking about those things, very secure. I was always going to work for someone who provided security. So in my working life, as far as how I generated income and wealth, I'd never really taken any great risks until I moved. I lived in Dubai for 5 years with a couple of pals, different pals at different times. And they were entrepreneurs. I was working for companies, they were entrepreneurs, and I just saw them grinding, not knowing when the next paycheck was coming, not knowing, but just in this creative place. And those two guys, Kada and Ben, who I live with, they just rubbed off. It just rubbed off. And I was like, these guys are just going after it, taking risks, living life a little bit more on the edge. And I saw their successes and their failures and how they came back from setbacks and stuff like that. And I was like, and when I left Dubai, I didn't realize it at the time, but they'd infected me with this idea of taking entrepreneurial risk. And then I was hooked.
Yeah, I think it's important to surround yourself with the right people. And
100%.
you could debate, if you weren't around those two people, would you have taken that risk as soon as you did? You may have come on to that, but that's the benefit of being around people who are on that journey.
Yeah, 100%. I think, one of my, how would you say, mantras now, one of my values is to surround yourself with people that are on the same path or on a path at least. You've got to be careful who you surround yourself with. If you surround yourself with people who drink, you'll drink more. You surround yourself with people who make money, you'll make more money. It's just the way it goes. So, And I don't think I realized these things at the time. Growing up in the military, it's not very deep and philosophical, I suppose, but it puts you in situations that might cause you to be. And then I started carefully selecting the people, and that I surrounded myself with, and I suppose now risk takers. But I had to shed a lot of weight as well, so people that I would perhaps have, people I went to school with are considered friends, who if I had met today, I wouldn't have been necessarily friends with. They had to go. They had to go. You've got to be ruthless, and you've got to cut off, people who are no longer serving, your purpose in life.
Yeah, I've been on that journey myself and still going on it.
Yeah.
I enjoy that journey as well.
Yeah.
I'd like to touch on the military for a small part. It's always interested me. I think most males would say the same, right?
Yeah.
It appears interesting from what you see and how it's perceived. There's a lot to cover in 12 years, right? But what's the, when you look back, what's the key things you've taken away that's like helped you in business or set you up for what you do now?
I think it's much to do with personal leadership, discipline and self-control, things like that. It was often, people think of the military, they think discipline, but it's discipline that's installed upon you. You don't really have a choice. If you want to be there, you've got to kind of, follow the rules. But it gets you thinking as a young man as discipline. And I always say to people now, discipline, or you could replace that word with self-control, is the price that you pay for freedom. If you want to be free from the tyranny of yourself, from the disappointment that we constantly encounter, from the failures due to your own choices, if you want to be free from those things, it is discipline that will set you free. So it's doing the hard things. It's doing the things when nobody's looking, when there's no one to give you praise and say, oh, that's amazing, all the rest of it, do you still do them? You know, do you still get up in the dead of night and do the things you got to do? And you still put the hours in, reading, absorbing, meditating on how you've been, you know? I would say that was the biggest discipline. So it went from installed discipline you don't have a choice from, to then like getting out afterwards and thinking, right, I'm on my own now. There's no one to tell me to get up in the morning. I mean, everything was taken care of. I got told when to get up, what to wear when you got up. They literally would post orders every night on the wall, and you would have to read orders, and you would know what was going on every day. Thinking removed. So then when you're out in the big bad world on your own, it's like, okay, self-discipline, you know, so they have to kind of reinstall that stuff. So yeah, that was the biggest takeaway.
Yeah, isn't it Jocko Willink that says discipline equals freedom?
Yes, Jocko Willink. Yeah.
So coincidentally, this is, you know, right in my world, where I'd like to be at the minute. Yeah, we me and my girlfriend do a quote every year, and for the last 3 years, it's been a discipline-focused quote.
Okay.
And we've built on discipline year after year, and I think that's probably, if I could summarize like one, like, you know, attribute that's changed everything, I think it would be discipline.
Yeah.
Doing things when people aren't looking, building that self-esteem.
What's the quote for the year?
It's discipline equals freedom again.
Yeah.
It's 2 years in a row now. Yeah. 2 years in a row. It's simple. It just does what it needs to do.
Yeah.
What advice would you give? Because I know how hard it is to build discipline, and it takes a very long time. We're talking many months, potentially even years to build up. What advice would you give to someone who's trying to build it on their own, you know, without anyone to hold them accountable?
I think you just touched on it. It's, you know, discipline doesn't come like that. We're in that world. We hear it all the time, the instant gratification world where we want everything now. But discipline takes so much time to install. And it's like anything else worth having. It's, you know, it requires pursuing. You have to pursue it, you know, and bit by bit you build on it. And so I apply this to everything that I'm trying to do, and everything that I would teach people is to write it down. You know, you have to have a vision of what that is. So if you're aiming at a new discipline, you know, the most obvious ones are around food or movement, perhaps bedtimes and get up times, is you have to write it down and you have to make it attractive. You know, we give ourselves these rules to follow and they just tyrannize us. And then when we fail to do them, we're all deflated and in a worse condition than when we started. But there's a way you could make these things you're trying to install attractive, appealing to yourself, and write it down. It's like, you know, writing and talking like we are now is thinking. You know, it's to have a thought until it's written down or until it's out in the ether. It's not a proper thought. You know, it has to be recorded somehow between two people or on a piece of paper. Write it down. So the thing you're trying to do, you know, and give it a little timeline. And it doesn't have to be in a fancy journal. It could be, I use the notes on my phone, post-it notes, get a nice diary, whatever, write it down.
Just get it out the mind.
Get it out of the mind, you know, and then it's a proper thought. It's clear. You know, you can see it, you can judge it, you can adjust it, and then you're on.
I agree. Yeah. And I also think I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. I think it's important not to be too hard on yourself. For example, many times I tried to go alcohol free, and I would do a couple of months and then have a drink. And instead of carrying on, I would be like, oh, I failed now. And then potentially go back. Coming up to 500 days now. And that streak is really, really there. But again, it took a few times to get there. And I think it's very important for people not to be too hard on yourself if it's proving difficult in the early stages. Yeah,
I think 100%, you know, you are going to fail at lots of things. It's like, and it sounds so cheesy and cliche and oversaid, but, you know, failure is the greatest teacher. It's like, expect to fail. And then when it happens, have the right attitude, face it, you know, sit in it, ride the wave of failure. What's it teaching me? You know, and that's how to approach failure. You know, it's coming your way. It's 100%. And if you're not failing at stuff, then you're not trying.
Trying enough.
You're not trying. You're like, go and do something. You know, so many people in Wales, in the UK, the world. But if we think about Wales, which I often do, is like, so many people are just in the comfort zone, you know, trying to avoid any type of discomfort. It's like, well, okay, but you won't grow. You probably shrink.
Completely agree. That's a conversation me and Kyle have regularly.
Yeah, I bet he gets hammered, mate.
Oh yeah, for sure. All right, talk to me about the journey since you left the forces. There's been loads that's happened, but give me an overview of what did you do when you stepped out, and how's it been over the last however many years it is?
So I've been out now as much time as I was in, 12 and a half years. And when I left, I was 30. So I had a fresh zeal for life. And my girlfriend at the time was studying, I had recently qualified in occupational health. And I watched her go through her studies and I was like, okay, that's something I could do, something I could apply. It had structure. I liked structure at the time. And I could see something you could study towards and apply. A lot of the things that I already had would be supportive of it. So I graduated. I spent 3.5 years graduating in occupational health and safety. Whilst doing that, I did that largely online and then some classroom work. But the course provider that I bought it from was set up in Dubai. And so I thought, well, I'm going to finish my studies in Dubai. I'll go over there and just give it a crack and see. I knew some people. There's a lot of ex-military guys working in Dubai, working in the Middle East. So I went out and badgered a friend of mine for a spare bedroom for a bit and set myself up. So got into occupational health, got a job as a health, safety, security and environmental manager for a big shipping company, Swedish company, and which I was completely underqualified for. And it took me about 2 years till I had my first day in work where I felt like I knew what I was doing. I was just blagging it. And I remember a friend of mine at the time who had just left Dubai. He had been in occupational health as well, in construction. And I remember ringing him. I was in a boardroom. I was about to run my first big boardroom meeting. Had kind of the GMs coming down, the finance managers, and a couple of directors of the business. Fancy Dubai boardroom. Had all the water laid out. My presentation, I'd been over 1,000 times, but I was bricking it. I was bricking it. I felt completely. What do you call it when you feel as though you shouldn't be there?
Oh yeah, imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome. It was imposter syndrome, like on steroids. And I remember ringing Wilma. I was in there like 2 hours early, still sat in this boardroom rehearsing this presentation. It was just a safety presentation. And I was like, dude, I feel like I'm, I don't belong here kind of thing. And he's like, mate, no one belongs there. He said, as they come into that room, he said, just nod to yourself and rehearse in your mind. She's blagging it. He's blagging it. She's blagging it. And as they came in, that's what I did. And they all sat down and the presentation went well and all the rest of it. And, after spending some time in the company, it turns out they were blagging it. The MD didn't have a clue what was going on. He was hemorrhaging money left, right and centre. And people were blagging it, So I think that kind of fake it till you make it thing came about. And whether I believe in that wholeheartedly, I don't know. But you're giving a lot more than you actually know yourself quite often. You know what I mean? You're bringing more to the table. So that was how I entered the working world from the military, which there's a lot of doors open for you when you leave the military. I think you have an element of trust, especially if you've done a few years and depending who you've served with and what you've done, you get a level of trust that people give you. They expect loyalty because you've been loyal, to things greater than yourself. Discipline. Maybe the ability to take risks. They know that you don't mind a few risks there as well. And so there's some doors open to you already in places that perhaps you wouldn't belong, so you kind of get that in and then it's up to you to then back that up. So everywhere I went after the military, I was well received and which was a huge help, and I felt very blessed to do that. But even that, all that going well, I was out in Dubai and had this job. I was living with some pals. Now we had our own apartment, nice apartment near the beach. Life was good on the surface of things, but I was having an existential crisis inside. Internally, I felt. I think because of Afghan, surrounded by a lot of death, makes you question life a bit more deeply. And I was still questioning those things, like what was that all about, And I was driving to work one day. And BBC World News was playing. And there's bombing in Yemen, bombing in Saudi, bombing in Afghan, bombing in Iraq. It was like the whole Middle East was on fire. That's what it seemed like. And I remember praying out loud. I'd met a girl, and a South American girl, really, really hot, really cool girl. And she went to church, right? And she went to church. And I remember we went for a date on a Thursday. And I was like, what are you doing this weekend? Because the weekend was Friday and Saturday in the Middle East. And she said, oh, I'm going to church tomorrow. And I was like, what do you mean you go to church? You're way too cool to go to church. She's like, I go to this big American church. It's like thousands of people go. It's like on fire, you know, the music's amazing. Everyone's really like full of the spirit. And that. I was like, okay, great. And she invited me along. So I went to this thing, and I was hit with this wall of emotion while I was there. I didn't really know what to do with it. You know, I was just hit by this, what I would describe now as just a spirit enveloping me. And the next day I'm driving to work with this BBC World News thing going on, all this bombing. And I'm in there, and I just prayed and I said, you know, if there's more to life than this, then I want to know. I want to know, is there, you know, I heard about this God, and is there such thing? You know, I want to know. And I'm driving my truck down the street, and I turned the corner, and I just had a massive encounter with God. You know, he just opened up the universe to me and said, yeah, you're not on your own. It's like, you asked the question. You know, my heart and my mind was open. So when you ask a question with an open heart, you get the answer. And that's where I found faith in the Middle East, you know, and that changed the trajectory of my life entirely.
How long ago was that now?
9 years ago.
Really?
Yeah, 9 years. So that was a big thing for me, you know, and I gave my life a couple of years later, you know, because I was investigating and praying and reading and all the rest of it. So my life is defined by my faith. You know, my life is my faith, and my heart is directed and my mind is directed by my faith, more and more so as I get older. And I rang my older brother, the one who I had a fight with, James. Have you met James?
I've met James.
You met James? Yeah. And James was a fighter growing up, you know, and had his own troubles. And I remember after going to church a couple of times with this girl, I rang my bro, and I was due to go home the week later, and I was like, dude, I've been going to church a little bit. And he's like, me too. I said, I've been doing a little bit of praying. And he's like, me too. He said, do you want to get baptized? I was like, yeah, why not? So then I came over a week later, we got baptized in the Rumney River together with all our mates around, and that was good. So me and him have been on that journey. And so has Joe, who you know, my younger brother, has been on a journey with that. And my other brother, Sam, to some extent. And who knows, maybe Matthew one day.
Yeah. Oh, what a wonderful story. Because I know you weren't previously. Joe has never been religious, neither Sam. So, you know, it's really nice to hear that it's played a positive part. And you're very centered and, you know, very calm. And I think that's probably played a part over the years. Has it come out from the military and finding faith and helping with your purpose?
Yeah, definitely, mate. Definitely. More so recently. I became a father recently. And, you know, so my life is directed at my wife and my daughter, you know, to be calm, to be that calming presence in the house. But yeah, certainly my faith has defined that, you know, everything that I want to be. You know, I have an example to follow. So I the best example as far as I could tell. But so yeah, it is definitely been a big part.
It shows.
Thank you, mate.
That's good.
Thank you.
Let's go to the Green Mile training camp, because I've been there previously.
Yeah.
I love the place.
Yeah.
I haven't been there in a while, admittedly. But how did that start? So talk me through the process of that. The idea first.
Yeah.
It's a hell of a setup.
Yeah. Thank you, mate. Well, yeah, it's a labour of love and passion. I came back to the UK after being away for many years, and you know, been through some downs and some ups as everybody has. And I'd been to the bottom. I'd been to the bottom after getting out. You know, before everything we've just been talking about, I'd really had a 12-month period where I was at the bottom. I would describe as the pit, you know, and I was at the bottom of the pit. And, you know, I had family, I had a past, I had a future, you know, I had some resources in my favour, and I still found myself at the bottom of the pit, you know, and wondering what was going on, feeling low, crying a lot, you know, I'd cry from day to day. And when I came back to the UK, having been away for a long time and sorted myself out and lots of things gone well for me, I wondered about people, especially guys who didn't have those things in their corner. How did they get out of the pit? You know, I was like, how did they get out of there? And when I was at the bottom, I used physical training. I've always been into training, you know, since I was 12, 13. I've always trained in one way, shape or form. I had that, and that's one of the things that allowed me to tread water during it. You know, just keep my head above. Was I got some endorphins, some dopamine just from physical training every day. And when I was lowest, that's when I trained the hardest. And I would say to people at the time, I would train my way out of this situation. But I had them skills. I knew how to train. I know how to move. I know how to, you know, focus my mind for that. A lot of guys don't. And I came back to the UK, and diabetes is going up, obesity is going up, mental health is going up, suicide is the biggest killer of men, the largest population in prison is men, most of the homeless people in the streets are men, most people having to leave for work are men, most people who die in war are men, most people who have mental health problems are men, and like the list is so long. Men are in a real pickle, and I'm like, well, you know, having been in a pickle myself and have had some tools to help get out of it, how can I apply that to the best way? So I started the Green Mile movement, which is a men's physical training. It's not a charity; it's a CIC, but it's like it's a social enterprise. So I started that, training guys, gave out 250 leaflets around Cardiff City Centre, Roke Park, come up with a logo, a tagline: "Fortune favours the brave." My mate knocked up a flyer for me, and I gave all them out, and just offered free physical training for guys, any kind of physical training. We're doing a lot of calisthenics at the time. Just teach guys how to do one pull-up and a set of push-ups, and that was it. That's the start. If you can do those things, you're away, mate, you know? So I gave out 250 leaflets, first session on a Wednesday evening, turned up. It was summertime in Roth Park by the pull-up bars, you know, the green pull-up bars. Yeah. No one shows up. My brother Jim drove past, just coincidentally happened to drive past on my first session, just saw me on my own, like had a little tear for me. And no one showed up. And then I ran one the next, so I just trained myself. Ran one the next week. A couple of guys showed up. A week later, 7, and then 1 again, and then 10, and then. So anyway, that begun this training movement, and we built it. There must have been about 500 guys have come through it now over the last 5 years. And I knew that I wanted it to have its own facility, you know, like where we could train hard, we could do other things on there. So I had the idea of the Green Mile movement's own facility. I thought on a farm. I didn't have a farm. I had to go and find a farm. And I did find a farm in Taff's Well, which is just behind my house. And I went up to the farm and bumped into the farmer, and I approached him and said, you know, I've got this idea. I want to build this training camp. It's just a small idea at the moment, but I just start small, grow it. And he was like, well, I think it's a really cool idea. Yeah, no, let's go for it. I said, you know, I'm happy to enter into a lease agreement with you. I'll secure everything, you know, legally and all the rest of it. He's like, well, just get yourself going. So I've had a couple of skills, but this farm needed some facilities on it. You know, I don't build facilities. And so I'm up there one day just humping and dumping some wood to try and build some pull-up bars. And a guy shows up in his truck, a guy called Craig. And Craig's mum we'd got into a Cardiff Life magazine, this training group we had. And Craig's mum, who was a hairdresser, had seen it in the magazine and said, this guy's trying to build this place. Your company builds those things. You want to go and see him? So anyway, Craig had a company called Industrious Fitness that built outdoor training rigs. So he drove up one day just randomly and was like, hey, dude, you know, I do this. I heard you're trying to do this thing. And we just got chatting, and then one thing led to another. So me, Craig, and Josh, the three of us, and Josh came along a bit later. We now run the Green Mile training camp. And that's been going for 4 years.
Nice. You know what I love about you? What you just said there was the physical training part helping you out when you were in a pickle.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in a few pickles, as most men have throughout their life.
Yeah.
And when you mentioned it, it's just come to light to me even more. I'm very fortunate that I've trained since late teens until now. And I've often used physical training to get out of a pickle as well.
Yeah.
But then the people who don't or haven't had experience in physical training from an early age, you know, what do they do? How do they cope?
Yeah.
So I think it's fantastic.
Thank you, mate.
What you started, yeah.
it's the basis. You know, we always say at the Green Mile Training Camp and this new venture THP that we started is it begins with physical health. You know, I forget the word fitness. It begins with physical health. There's a lot of chat about mental health, maybe a bit about emotional health. And they're suggesting that all we need to do is talk about our problems more and be a bit more vulnerable. Well, okay, maybe a little bit. You know, certainly men could do with talking a bit more, but it's not the solution. That's not what we do. We could do with talking a bit more, but what we do is we do. You know, guys have got to do stuff together, physical stuff. That's how we're biologically set up, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. That's how we're engineered. You're not going to take that away. So until we start doing that, you know, we're going to struggle. So that's what the movement was about originally. But so it always begins with physical. You know, you've got to take care of the physical. And we define that not as biceps, not as abs, not as the ability to run a marathon in a super time like yourself, mate. Although those things are good to aim at. It's how well do you breathe? Do you know what I mean? A lot of people are dysfunctionally breathing now. 53% of the UK adult population have dysfunctional breathing. That might manifest in mouth breathing, upper chest breathing, breathing too much, hyperventilating, breathing too shallow, erratically. So we begin with that. You know, the first thing you ever did in life was take a breath. The last thing you'll ever do is take a breath. So we start with breathing, and the ones in between are there to serve you. So we teach functional breathing from a sport science perspective, not spiritual breathing, nothing like that. We're into the science behind these things, right? Sleep. How well do you sleep? You can't sleep properly if you're not breathing properly. All right, so we teach people how to breathe for sleep, and how the science behind sleep, what's going on hormonally, how do you down-regulate the nervous system and the brain ready for deep sleep, you know? That's our second pillar. Movement. We were born to move. If we don't move, we suffer. We all sit down too much, we're all suffering. You know, you were born to move. When you came into this world, you moved very, very well. You know, when you were a toddler, you were moving the best you've ever moved. And so nobody taught you. You just knew how to do that. You taught yourself. And now we reverse engineer the body. So movement is key, but not vanity movement, functional movement, you know, joint mobility, flexibility, that kind of stuff. Hydration and nutrition. We are 70% water. You know, we are a big vessel of water. You just reminded me. Thank you, mate. Mm-hmm. We need to hydrate. 90% of the UK adult population, I read this in the British Medical Journal, 90% of the UK adult population are underhydrated.
90%?
90%, mate. It's a large proportion, you know. We're drinking too much coffee. We're drinking too much Red Bull, Monster Energy, you know, and all the rest.
Fizzy drinks as well.
Fizzy drinks, mate. You know, we're not drinking enough water. And we are mostly water, you know.
You know what I found interesting on like as a journey that I've gone on over the last few years, and the journey that you're on as well, is how important the simple things are in life. Like I've overcomplicated it before.
Yeah.
Breathing, moving, water, and whole foods. The foods that are around 100 years ago. Yeah.
Well, how have you overcomplicated it?
I've overcomplicated it before by trying to have like a really complex diet. You know, that's protein focused because the gym side of things.
Yeah.
But, you know, trying many different things, trying to do everything rather than just the simple things, like loads of different sports or, you know, a variety of different things. But since I've honed it back and I've done more with less and like really focused on the breathing, the breath work and the water, it's just all changed.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I think it's because it's so simple, it often goes over people's heads because there's so many distractions out there with regards to how you should be, you know, when it comes to health. It's difficult.
And you almost think it can't be that simple.
Yeah.
Surely I can't just breathe, drink water and eat healthy foods and move and I'll be okay.
It's too easy. It's too easy. It is that simple. And it's, I think it's so obvious that people miss it. It's staring them in the face, but they miss it. You know, they're like, I need the app, I need the pill, I need the fancy footwear, I need the, you know, you add it to the list. And it's what we once had. It's what we once knew instinctively, and we've lost it. We've lost this ability because of all the distractions around us. It's back to basics. So we're trying, that's our message, is back to basics. You know, and that's where we're going with it, mate. You know?
So for anyone that doesn't know what the Green Mile Training Camp is, what facilities do you have there, and like who's the best? Like who would you want to see there?
That's a great question. So the facility side, we've got 110 acres. We have a studio. We have a big glass-fronted studio that sits on it, called Mountain Yoga Studio. But the Green Mile Training Camp itself has an obstacle course. It has the Royal Marines Commando 30-foot ropes, an exact replica of the one in the Commando school. Has a survival school, lots of calisthenics gyms dotted around. It has a sauna tent and a team plunge pool fed by natural spring water. So we do a session, a hot and cold session, which is very, very good for physical, mental health. Natural plunge pools, trail runs, sand pits dotted around, so we can take our shoes off and train with our shoes off. So it's on the side of a mountain, overlooking some greenery. So it's just that in itself. When people come up, park in the car park, leave the phones in the changing rooms, and they detach from their life and they're just out in nature where we belong, and they feel restored. And then we give them a 50k log to put on their back. So we've got lots of facilities, and we train lots of teams. So we trained the Welsh men's rugby team for the World Cup. We trained in 2023. That's on YouTube. The Green Mile Training Camp WRU video. It's very, very good. We trained lots of pro football and rugby netball teams. We built the plunge pool for the Welsh women's rugby squad so they could get the whole team in at once. So lots of teams like that, and a lot of corporates. So we have a lot of businesses and charities and even universities and colleges come up, and we teach them physical health, but also leadership, motivation, team building, and then we do a lot of health and well-being, the kind of nicer stuff, the easier stuff, in the studio, on the decking, finish off with some marshmallows over the fire kind of thing, Yeah.
I'm really interested on like the corporate side of things. When they come up to the facilities,
Yeah.
do they do the hot and cold plunge as well?
They do. You've got to give them options.
I was going to say.
You've got to give them options, mate. It
really is hit and miss, isn't it?
It's hit and miss. It's hit and miss. A lot of people are really into it, and they are infectious. They'll get everybody else on board. Some people are just a straight blank. That's not for me. Fair enough. It's difficult. Cold water training is difficult. And do you want to be, in your swimwear in front of your colleagues in a hot tent? You know what I mean?
Or shivering.
Yeah.
With a cold blanket around you after because you can't breathe.
Exactly. It's, it's a challenge. It's a real, you're out your comfort zone in that place, and that's the whole point, is the challenge. So the corporates, we give them options. We teach them sleep masterclass instead. So if they don't want to do, we can teach them sleep. We do different breathwork practices with them. We get motivational speakers in to talk about different things. So we've got options.
Cool. Before we jump onto team health performance, I'm curious about routines for you. Do you have a daily routine that you go to every day? Because obviously you're a father now, a few different things going on. How structured is it?
Yeah, no, routine's key. Without a routine, some people can operate without a routine, and I get that. Not everyone's the same. Most people can't. They try to. They spend their whole life perhaps without a routine, and they don't hit the spot. I have a routine, and before my daughter Grace came along, I said to my wife, "Listen, I know that time is going to be in short supply, but I have to have some time for myself, as you do. We have to figure this out." So I said, we're quite early. We go to bed early, and we get up early. But I said, I'll pinch that, I'll draw that closer. So I go to bed at the same time, but now I get up about 2 hours before the girls. So I get up at 4:30, and I get it in. And then, it's just changed everything. I used to get up early anyway, but now 4:30 club. It's the 4:30 club for me, mate.
I'm in there as well.
Yeah.
4:30 every day.
You still on it?
Yeah, every day for a year and a half now.
And bedtime?
It's gone. Oh. Hopefully you can make me feel better about this, because everyone I tell, they're like, really, that early?
Yeah.
8 o'clock.
Yeah, mate.
You're 8 o'clock as well?
So Sarah is in bed for 8, and I normally join her, either read in bed or I'll come up for about past.
I read in bed every night up until 8.
Yeah.
I can't believe it. I've turned 30, and I honestly, 8 o'clock every night in bed. Yeah. But going on to the attribute that helped with everything was discipline, sleep. I read a book by Matthew Walker,
Yes.
the sleep scientist on
Yeah.
sleep, called Why We Sleep.
Why we sleep. Yeah.
And it just opened my mind to
Yeah.
like, we spend 1/3 of our life sleeping. So why wouldn't I prioritize this? And I started prioritizing it, and just everything changed.
Yeah, it is.
It was important.
So it's one of the basics. It's one of the basics you've got to get right. And the thing is, when you're trying to sell that, especially to someone in their teens or 20s, you talk about routine and sleep, and they're like, they are asleep by the end of the sentence.
I'm going out partying this weekend.
I'm going out partying. It's not very sexy. It's not appealing, but it depends what you want from life. If you want to achieve, and if you want to feel peace, if you want to feel composure, if you want mental clarity, if you want to be, have all those, real blessings in life, if you want those things, then you have to prioritize the basics. If you want to burn the candle, that's what I did. I was I wish I discovered this as early as you had, mate, to be fair. The military would have us up early, but didn't mean we went to bed early. We were, work hard, play hard.
Yeah, for sure. I think you have to have that experience as well, though, right?
Yeah.
To really value what you're doing now.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the thing that I'm most interested in. So Team Health Performance, which is a new business.
Yes.
Yeah. So what problems are you solving? Team Health Performance.
So healthy people, healthy business. That's the way we look at it. We're big into improving productivity and energy. We want to be, one of the taglines we wrote recently when writing the new website was, we are your new energy provider. We want to bring the energy to the place. We go into a lot of corporates. We had a lot of corporates come up to us for, these team corporate days. They still do. And they would ask, do you come into businesses to do this stuff? And at the time we didn't, but we started saying yes to a couple of gigs, and we went in and delivered some stuff, and the reception was really good, and we're looking around going, people really need this stuff. As I read in the ONS recently, Wales's productivity is down 23% on England, and the UK is down on the rest of the G7 countries. So our productivity is through the floor.
Why do you think Wales is lower than England?
Oh. Nah, I think it largely to health. I think if you just walk down the high street in Wales, you can see the mental health problems that people are having. It's in their eyes, you can see it, and obviously the physical health. Every health statistic that you could measure that is worth measuring is going the wrong way. All of them, without exception. It's not a good outlook for Wales right now. So we want to do something about that. We're not just going to sit by, and obviously the government aren't going to solve that problem. So it's going to be the free market. It's going to be entrepreneurs, businesses, social enterprises, charities that figure that out. So we're going to be one of them. And up until now, so THP is going into businesses, trying to put health and the basics, which we've talked about, back on the map, and energize the workplace in doing so. So that's our mission: healthy people, healthy business. And by doing that, we're hoping to change the tide and be actually an appealing and attractive health and well-being company. Up until now, it's been very, with a few exceptions, it's been very corporate, let's say.
It's not sexy.
It's not sexy. It's not sexy, mate. And we want to be, not necessarily sexy, but we would take that if ever we were called it, but I doubt we will be. But we want to be attractive, And
relatable.
Relatable. Yeah, 100%. Approachable.
Yeah.
Fun. We want to be authentic, and we want to come with real sessions that bring real results to people. And we want to start changing the perspective that people have on health and how they define it and how they go after it, So if you imagine your favorite podcasters, Chris Williamson and Stephen Bartlett and all these people, Jocko, Joe Rogan, maybe people who we listen to and we hear from. Imagine them bringing their best guests into your workplace to teach you elements of self-improvement in a motivational way that is applicable to everybody, that includes everyone. We want to be approachable and relatable to everyone. And that's who we want to be.
Yeah, nice. So to help me understand and anyone else watching, if someone was to book Team Health Performance, talk me through what they could expect on the first day or the first few days.
Okay. So we're coming out to begin with our first offering is something we've called Reboot 2025, which is imagine a health retreat in your workplace. We're coming to you. They're just simply 90-minute sessions where we bring a series of practices, measurements, talks, routines, some physical, some breath work, some sleep, some mental, mindset, a big medley of different health practices combined into a 90-minute high-energy session. There's some props involved. There's some music involved. There's a Q&A and discussion involved. And that's what we're coming into businesses with. So it's a 90 minutes, a very, very easy decision to make. It's not too much time away from the desk, and that's where we're going with it.
Nice. So 90 minutes isn't too much of an investment, but it's long enough to feel a difference. So anyone who's coming into that 90-minute workshop, how do you want them to feel after that? Or how are you expecting them to feel after that?
Energized, motivated, engaged, enlightened, educated, all these things, to have, a new fire in their belly for self-improvement, starting with the basics. And as you and I know, it's a journey, right? It's a journey that will never end, but it's an exciting journey when you think about, all right, what's the next thing I can refine about myself? It just builds, it just gets better. You feel great. You're full of the right hormones. You're thinking well. We're big into how you think. We think that you're rarely defeated by what people say about you, but you're often defeated by what you say about you. So is there any way that you can change the record? Well, it turns out there is a way you can change the record. There are practices that can switch a negative mindset into a positive one. It's habitual, so it requires persistence and consistency, but it can be done.
And they all compound over time, right? So you prove one thing, then proves the next, and all of a sudden, superhuman might be a bit of an extreme, right? But you're feeling like a completely different person and acting like a completely different person.
Yeah. You wouldn't believe the person that's inside, and it's every single individual has greatness. They have greatness. We're designed for greatness. If we're not achieving greatness and you don't feel like you're on a path to greatness, then you're not on the right path. It's as simple as that. And everybody has a purpose. Everyone's different, and everyone is equal, and everybody has it. And a lot of people have not discovered it because they're so tired, because they're hyperventilating, because they're underhydrated and undernourished. We're inflated with calories, but we're undernourished. We're all in the wrong branch of our nervous system day to day. We don't have the right hormones. We're full of adrenaline and cortisol, so we never get into rest and digest. We never get into the right creative branch of our nervous system where we realize who we were meant to be.
Do you think the corporate industry and these companies should have a greater responsibility to their employees to do this stuff?
It's a good question that I've been thinking about recently. Like, whose responsibility is this? Do you know what I mean? It's a great question. It's one that's been floated a few times recently, I've heard. And because there is a huge element of personal responsibility, right? It's not the boss's responsibility for your sleep, but the boss can go a long way in allowing you to achieve it, And I think business, whether you call it their responsibility, their duty, or their service, I don't know. It's their moral obligation to help people improve themselves. Business is not there for profit. A business is not there to make profit. Profit is there for the business to thrive and allow the people within it to thrive. Kind of Richard Branson's model for business is it's there for the greater good, and you spend most of your life in the workplace. You might as well be getting better while you're there.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm glad that you said that about the personal responsibility from people to look after themselves in all the ways that you're saying. I completely agree.
Yeah.
There is also that small part of me that always thinks the employer has a role to play, but I think as you go into the corporate industry and those companies are much larger. The larger the company goes, I tend to see the less responsibility they take in helping employees maybe get better.
Yeah, I things are changing, and that is the whole mental health, awareness stuff in the corporate world is kind of a stab at that. It's a stab in the dark. They don't really know what they're dealing with, I don't think. We'll fix mental health by talking about it, and it's like, okay, that's a part of the solution. It's a small part.
Yeah, sometimes they need the experts to come in who are really passionate and been there and worked on it themselves, like you and Team Health Performance, to help out and guide them on that.
Yeah. Hopefully, that's the way we're hoping they're going to see it. Is let us help you. You know what I mean? These are deep things. This is a lifetime for a lot of people of conditioning. A talking therapy app is not going to take care of it.
Yeah.
It's going to be a multi-layered approach to fixing this problem.
How does a corporate company realize they need to bring someone like you into the business?
I think they'll already know it. I think it depends how you want to think about it. But what's the vibe like in the office? Is it an energetic place to be? How do you feel about entering the place when you walk in there? Is it like you're going after it? You're looking forward to getting in there? Is it are you pumped for it, or is it like, here we go, just got to drag myself through? I think the vibe in the place, the culture of the place, these are all indicators of whether people are in good, physical, mental, emotional shape or not. Yeah.
I've got an interesting question on that one. So I know a few people who are in positions which aren't likely to be energetic or providing the opportunity that they need to, potentially corporate organizations, right? So whose responsibility is it to notice that? Is it management, executive level, or should it be people who are on the ground feeding that information up?
So middle management is who we speak to a lot. HR, they're the kind of the gatekeepers of this stuff. So it seems. And I think it's 75% of HR are female, and they have greater receptors for these things. They notice these things. They pick up on these things, and they understand. They're more compassionate, I think, is just at the bottom line. They have more compassion, and they see suffering, in all its ways that it manifests. So, HR managers who can speak up through the business, and they can speak down, they can speak across. They're great people. They rub shoulders with everyone in the business. And their business is to be in everybody's business,
yeah,
to a certain extent.
And like you said, times are changing, and people are becoming more aware of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people feel like it's a responsibility to look out for the well-being of others.
Yeah.
I believe anyway. I'm seeing that change for sure.
Yeah. No, I think so. I think I think there's some huge shifts going on culturally, just in the world. In the world, it's. You could say that's always been happening, but it's never been happening at this rate.
Not this rate, yeah.
There's huge opportunity to shift for the better. If you search for it, you'll find it, and that's what we want to be part of, that wave. That new, fresh evolution of new approaches and self-improvement.
Yeah, nice. So what's on the radar for the next 12 months of Team Health Performance?
Get Reboot 2025 into as many organizations as we can. So it is, it's business focused, but it's organization. So just to go in there and spread the message of health, starting with the basics. If we focus on health, performance improves. So from an organizational perspective, you want everyone to be healthy. It's just a better place to work. But actually, when everybody's taking care of these basics, these health metrics, the business thrives as a result. It's a win-win, and we think that the leverage of performance through health is one that's been overlooked. So I'll give you a stat. Every year in the European Union, once a year, road traffic accidents on one day go up by 15%, and every year, correspondingly, once on a day every year in Europe, road traffic accidents go down by 15%. What do you think those days are?
I've got no idea.
Daylight saving.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we're talking about sleep and go to bed early. You lose an hour of sleep. Wow. Road traffic accidents go up by 15%, and it's roughly similar in the US as well. And there's a bit of variation in those stats, but they go up a significant amount. You could just say, right. And then when you gain an hour of sleep, they come down correspondingly by about roughly the same. So we lose an hour of sleep, and something as significant as driving to work, there's a big shift in performance. You could call that performance, right? How you get to work safely. How many people are losing more than an hour? 2 hours, 3 hours? Who's been burning the candle at both ends for decades? lots of people. How much efficiency is the business losing as a result of just people being underslept? So we use that as one of the metrics. Can we get you better sleep? It's quite easy to get a large proportion of people just a little bit of better sleep. Makes a huge shift, as we know, in our own self and therefore the organization.
And like you just said, it's in the best interest of the organization to have healthy people, to improve productivity, which will improve the bottom line of a business. Not that that's the goal, right? But that's how they can start thinking about it's an investment. It's an investment into their people.
It's an investment, 100%. We think it's an investment you can get the greatest return on. And there are studies out there. There's a lot of people, a lot of organizations and universities who are studying, health and well-being and the return you get. And there's varying numbers. There's significant return. You could say that all the studies are showing significant return when you invest in health and well-being. We think that the health and well-being investments that are being made at the moment are not as efficient and as well placed as they could be. And that's just going to get better, and as that gets better, the returns are going to get better. So bottom line, if that's your main focus, if you are a profit-driven organization, get that completely. There's money to be saved and made.
Yeah, nice. It's an exciting time.
Yeah.
Well, what about your personal life? I know you said you've had your daughter recently.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that is going on training-wise? Have you the daughter? Do you want to talk about that?
So I'm training for Mont Blanc in September and trying to keep my routine strong for that whilst navigating fatherhood. So our approach to it was we do as the monkeys do. We all sleep together, me, my wife, and my daughter. We bought a king-size mattress, and so we've got space, and that's just worked out really well. I think just hormonally, when you're together as a family unit like that, my daughter Grace, she's just a lot more peaceful and calm. She knows mum and dad are there. She's sleeping better, We've never had a problem with that. She gets up a couple of times, and my wife breastfeeds, so the onus is on her more than me. But we're just loving that. I get the chance to just spend so much more time with her because we share that space. So I'm really, really enjoying that. And fatherhood is a gift. I see it as a gift every day, and I don't think I've laughed and smiled as much as I have in the last 9 months since she came along. She's enriched our lives.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of quick fire questions, which I haven't done before, but I'd like to know your actual suggestions. So, any book recommendations for me or anyone watching?
The book of Matthew in the New Testament. It's the first book. Read the first book. Start with the beginning. I would always say go to that. As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, written in 1903. As a man thinketh, so is he. So as a man continue to thinketh, so he remains. All about how you should construct your thought life, as you would construct the body, or any other kind of realm. And touching on sleep, you mentioned Matthew Walker. Sean Stevenson, Sleep Smarter, is a very, very good book. Talks about how you structure your day in order to set yourself up for the night. So it talks about circadian rhythms, lights, artificial light, natural light. Fantastic reads.
Nice. They're on my list now.
Okay.
Podcast recommendations. Do you have a favourite apart from this one?
Apart from this one, mate, what do I listen to a lot of? I love Stephen Bartlett. I like the way he asks questions, I think he's just a calm, inquisitive, curious guy. So I've listened to a fair bit of him recently. Jordan Peterson, has been fundamental in how I construct everything psychologically in the last, certainly the last 5 years. 12 Rules for Life was his book, and then he's got another one, 12 More Rules, I think, which is on the shelf.
It's a big read, that one, isn't it?
I haven't read the second one.
Oh, I've read the first one. It's a big read.
It's a big read. It's a big read. You've got a bit of time for that. So yeah, Jordan Peterson, I think is superb, and yeah, those would be my go-tos right now.
And final one, any quotes that you hold close to yourself?
Or any quotes? As a man thinketh, so is he. Out of your heart comes your thoughts. Out of your thought comes your circumstance. So the title of the book I just mentioned, As a Man Thinketh, So Is He, it's from Proverbs 23. And although not a faith-based book, it takes that idea of how you think becomes everything in your reality. So I'm trying to live by that and trying to shut down anything that doesn't serve the reality I'm going for, you know?
I love it.
So,
I'm on the same journey as well.
Sweet, mate.
Pleasure. Thanks for coming on. One final thing. Anyone out there who has been intrigued by this conversation, one bit of advice you can give them to take away from this. How can they start?
How can they start? Because I'm, continuing on what we're just saying, because I'm big into this and have been more recently, guard your thoughts. Just be aware of the things you spend time thinking about. Is it serving you? If it's not, shut it down. You have the choice to do that. It's possible, and it takes practice. It gets easier, and you won't understand the change that's about to happen to you when you start to do that. So guard your thoughts.
Great advice, man. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. What a fantastic episode with Chris Flynn, the founder of Green Mile Training Camp and Team Health Performance. Some of the key takeaways there for me were the importance of health and well-being, both inside and outside of work. And ultimately, it's the employee or the person's responsibility, not the employer. Chris is an entrepreneur in his own right, but one of our first few different guests coming from a health and fitness background rather than a technical background. So please let us know your thoughts and feedback in the comments and let us know if you want to see anyone else coming up next. Please like, comment, and subscribe.